you guys have anointed worship.
你们的敬拜非常的
Clap
有
for
恩
them
膏
as they're leaving.
啊，
They
为
did
他
super.
给在敬拜团掌声鼓励一下。
So yesterday morning, I told you a story
所以昨天早晨我跟大家分享了一个故事，
about the acrobat.
讲到空中飞人的故事。
But this morning, I'm going to tell you my story.
但是今天早上我要跟你分享的是我的故事，
So feel free not to take notes and just kick back and relax.
所以今天早上你不太需要写笔记啊，你就可以好好的享受这个故事。
But you have to stay awake still.
但是还是不可以打瞌睡。
I'm married,
我已经结婚了，
and I have twin boys that are almost 16 years old.
我有双胞胎的儿子，他们已经16岁
Double trouble.
啊，所以双胞胎是2倍的糟糕。
And I have a beautiful little girl that just turned 9 that looks a whole lot like you.
我有一个女儿，她才刚刚9岁，非常的美丽，看起来很像你们一样。
Because we adopted her from China 8 years ago.
因为我们8年前从中国领养这个女儿回来，
And you are making me very homesick for her.
所以看见你们我就好想她，好想家。
I look out on all your beautiful faces,
我看见你们美丽的面孔，
and I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope she grows up to be as beautiful as all of you.
我就很期待将来我女儿长大的时候像你们一样的美丽。
And I have to confess, I'm a little bit hug deprived.
那我要承认呢，我其实是很喜欢拥抱的，来台湾比较少的拥抱。
Because she's very affectionate. She's all over me all the time, hugging and kissing me.
那我的这个女儿呢，她很喜欢抱，她常常会抱我、亲吻我。
So any of you girls that feel led to hug me,
所以如果姐妹们你有感动要来可以抱我的话，来满足我这方面的缺乏，所
I
以
could
鼓
use
励
some hugs.
啊，鼓励你来
So-
主动来抱我。
My husband's. Oh,
I love you. God bless you.
thank you. My husband's name is Dale,
我的丈夫的名字叫做 Dale，
and I know this won't translate, but he's a Bubba. he's a good old boy that's not real gentle and tender.
那他是那种基本上典型的男士，就是不是很温柔的，
But I love him.
但是我很爱他。
And one night I thought I had kind of trained him well
那有一天晚上，我觉得我已经训练他训练很久了，应该他懂了。
because I woke up from my sleep and I was crying, but he had his arms around me, patting me.
那我在梦中呢醒过来，我就在哭，然后我就发现他其实一直抱着我，然后这样拍拍我。
I thought, oh.
我说啊，我训练的真好，好感动哦。
And as I cried, he's patting me, saying, it's okay, it's okay.
然后我一边哭，他就这样抱着我，拍拍我说没关系，没关系，没关系。
And I thought, how sweet. He finally learned to be gentle and tender with me.
我想说啊，他终于学会了温柔的款待，温柔的对待我。
And I just melted back into his arms and fell back asleep.
所以我就在他的怀抱当中融化，又回去入睡。
But when I woke up the next morning, I remembered how sweet my husband was in the middle of the night.
所以呢，第二天早上起来的时候呢，我就想到半夜的时候，我的丈夫有多甜蜜。
So I walked into work the next morning at the church in the best mood. I'm like, hey, everybody.
然后呢，我隔天去上班的时候，到教会里面的时候，我的心情是最好的。
They're like, why are you so happy?
然后他们就问我说：“你怎么那么开心啊
And I said, I got to tell you about Dale and how sweet he was to me last night.？”
我就说：“你要告诉你 Dale 昨天晚上对我有多甜蜜。”
And that same pattern repeated all day long
然后呢，整天我都是这么开心哦。
as I reflected on how my husband took care of me.
我就在回想我的丈夫半夜怎么样照顾我，
It was one of the sweetest, best days ever.
那是最美好、最甜蜜的一天对我来说。
And when I got home that night and I saw him,
当我那天晚上工作完回家看见他的时候，
I looked at him, my heart just went pitter-patter all over again.
然后我看见他的时候，我的心就在那边一直融化了。
And that evening as we were getting ready for bed and I looked across the bedroom at him,
然后那天晚上我们准备要上床睡觉的时候，我就在床的另外一端看着他，
my heart began to do a little more than pitter-patter.
我的心就不只是心跳加快而已。
I thought, we may be going to have some fun tonight.
可能今天晚上会有后康的。
And it was right as I thought that, my husband said, I'm sorry I hit in the face last night.
啊？
Let's say that. I said to my husband, What did you just say?
然后我就跟我丈夫说，你刚才说什么？
And he said, I'm sorry I punched you in the face last night.
然后他说，我真的对不起，因为我昨天打了你一拳。
I said, you did what?
我说你昨天晚上做了什么？
He said, yeah, I must have been having a bad dream and I just punched you in the face.
他说昨天晚上我一定是做噩梦，所以我就用力的挥了你，向你挥了一拳。
And you woke up crying, and so I was like trying to tell you, it's okay, it's
然后
okay.
你就醒来的时候，你在那边哭，所以我就抱你说没关系，没关系，哦，秀秀，哦，秀秀，哦，没关系。
How many of you know that changed everything?
有多少人知道这样的新的看见改变了所有的一切？
And we did not have a fun time in bed that night.
那天晚上没有任何的好康的代际发生。
I had believed a lie.
我相信了一个谎言。
We've been talking a lot about lies these last couple of days.
过去这几天我们一直讲到谎言，对不对？
Have you believed some lies?
你有没有相信一些的谎言在你里面？
You know, as Pastor Bob and Pastor Alan have been sharing, this is really deep truth, isn't it?
巴牧师跟艾伦牧师都也在这样的当中跟我们分享，这个是一个很深的一个奥秘，是不是？
And when our whole foundation shifts, it can feel like we got punched in the face.
你知道，当我们听到这样的一个真理的这启示的时候，就好像那种震撼度，就好像是我们被挨了一拳一样。
At least that's my experience when I stumbled upon Freedom Ministries.
至少这是我一开始经历自由事工的时候，我的感受是如此。
The avenue that God chose to speak to my heart and show me the lies I believed was through my professional lies first.
你知道吗？神怎么样透过我的生命开始告诉我，我里面所相信的谎言是透过我的工作。
So as I share my story, I really want to encourage you, particularly if you're in full-time ministry,
那我特别要鼓励我们当中，当我在分享我的故事，特别是我们当中的全职的传道人，
to please learn from my mistakes because I've been doing this a long time.
你一定要从我的挫败当中学习，因为我已经很多的时间都是这样子。
I've now been in full-time ministry for 30 years.
我全职服侍神已经30年了。
That deserves a ooh.
你应该有一个回应，昨天都有回应，怎么给他都没回应呢？
That's better.
啊，
So I'm a senior citizen now, so you got to listen to me.
所以其实我是长辈，你要注意听了。
I just turned 50.
我才刚满50岁，
I know you're thinking she can't possibly be that
我知道
old,
你的那个声音的意思就是我不可能看起来是50岁，
right?
是不是？
But several years ago when I was a youth pastor,
但是几年前，当我还是一个青年牧师的时候，
I had probably one of the best youth groups in the United States.
当时我所牧养的那群年轻人，大概是我可以想象是大概美国最好的青年的团契吧。
Our youth group had gone from about 60 students to about 700.
所以我们的青年的牧区成长从60个学生到700个学生。
But our church only had about 2,000 members.
可是我们的教会只有2000个会友，
So God was just supernaturally doing something with our students.
所以在我们的学生当中，神超自然的工作带来一个复兴。
People were flying in from all across America to see what we were doing.
很多人从美国各个地方坐飞机来到我们的教会来观摩我们在那边所做的青年事工。
And I thought we had all the bases covered: outreach, discipleship.
那我就想，所有的青年事工可以想的领域，我们都做得非常的卓越，不管是布道会也好，或者是门徒训练等等。
But one night my little world fell apart.
可是有一天，我的整个世界崩溃了，
At least it did in my heart.
至少在我里面的心开始崩溃。
I was praying about what to speak about, and I felt like God told me to speak about loneliness.
那我在想说，我在祷告寻求说，主，你要我讲什么样的信息？我就感觉主带领我要分享关于孤单的信息。
So I worked on my sermon all week, and I had a video, and then I was going to do my sermon, and I had another video.
所以呢，我就准备我的讲章，在讲这讲章的时候，我还有一个讲章前的影片跟讲到的内容，还有后面再播放另外一段影片。
So I introduced what I was going to talk about, and I told them that we were going to watch a video, and I went to sit down on the front row.
所以呢，我就跟他们分享说今天要讲的主题是什么。然后我说我们先来看这个影片。看影片的时候呢，我就坐到第一排那边跟着一起看影片。
And I was looking over my notes of my fantastic sermon.
然后我就在看我的预备的讲章，那真的是一篇非常好的讲章。
And I began to hear something behind me.
我就开始听见我后面有一个声音，
It was this.
那个声音是这样的，就是那个声音了。
What they were watching was teenagers on the screen talking about how they were lonely.
他们在看的影片其实就是年轻人在荧幕上面讲到他们孤单的感觉。
But I thought to myself, they're crying?
我
They're
想说，
already crying?
我说哈，才看一个影片就哭了，
They haven't even heard my fantastic sermon.
还没听我那么棒的讲章就哭。
And that's when God spoke to me and said, You're not going to preach that sermon.
然后那时候神就对我说：“你不要讲那篇道。”
And I'm like, my first thought was, and you couldn't tell me this on Tuesday before I did all the preparation?
我当下听的感受，第一个回应是：啊，那我礼拜二在预备的时候，你不会告诉我说不要讲这个哦。
But my next thought was, what in the world am I going to do? Because we have time to fill up.
那我另外一个想法进来就是，那我们要讲什么？因为我时间还是有讲到的时间呢。
So when the video ended, I walked up, stood about where I am now,
所以当影片结束的时候，我就走到台上，就站在我现在所站的地方。
and I told them, don't turn on the lights because I could tell young people were crying and I didn't want them to be embarrassed.
那我就告诉他们说，现在先不要开灯，因为我知道有很多的年轻人在哭，我不想让他们感觉到不好意思。
But I said, I really believe God wants to speak to you if you'll be honest and admit that you struggle with loneliness.
我就跟他们说，如果你愿意承认，其实你有孤单的这样的一个挣扎，今天神可以对你说话。
I don't know how it is here, but in America, it's hard for teenagers to admit they have problems in front of their peers.
我不知道台湾的年轻人是怎么样，在美国的年轻人要在同才的压力当中承认他们有问题是很困难的。
And I knew what I was asking them would require them dropping their pride and to do something out of their comfort zone.
我知道我跟他们所要求的，要他们所做的东西，其实是需要他们把他们的骄傲放在一边，然后才能够回应的。
But I said, if you'll be honest before God, and I know it may be embarrassing to you, but if you sometimes cry yourself to sleep or you just feel lonely, will you just stand up?
然后我就说，我这样做需要你诚实的面对，我也不是要让你感到羞愧。但是如果你承认，有的时候在夜间当中你是哭着入睡，或者是你就感受到这个很深的孤单的感觉，你可不可以从位置上站起来？
I had preached enough and given enough altar calls that I usually could judge how many would stand up.
那我当时讲到已经很有经验，所以我知道通常我做一个呼召，大概有多少会众会站起来。
I was expecting about 50 or 60 students to be brave enough and confess in front of all their peers that they struggled with loneliness.
我当下期待大概差不多有50到60个学生，他们够勇敢，可以在同才的面前站起来，然后承认他们有孤单的问题。
So I was shocked by what happened next.
所以接下来所发生的事情就令我非常的讶异。
In unison, about 500 young people stood up.
在同一个时刻，500个年轻人站起来，
They did not look around to see what their friends were doing. They just stood up.
他们没有转向他们旁边的人，然后问说他们要不要站起来，而是500个人同一个时间都站起来。
And I thought, how many kids in this great youth ministry, how is it possible that they struggle with loneliness like
我就
that?
想说，这么棒的一个青年事工，怎么还会有这么多的年轻人，他们在孤单当中挣扎着？
The video I was going to play at the end was someone just sitting at a grand piano singing a song.
然后最后我要播的那个影片，其实是一个人，他坐在他就一边弹着钢琴，一边在唱一首诗歌。
But he was going to sing about loneliness, so this is what I told them to do.
所以他在唱的那首诗歌是关于孤单，所以我就邀请那些站起来的年轻人这样做。
I told them, if you want to look at the screen for just a minute, that's fine, but I'd really prefer you close your eyes and receive this song from God.
然后我就告诉他们说，如果你要看那个影片，你也可以，但是我比较希望的是你们把眼睛闭起来，然后呢，让神的爱来触摸你的心。
So as the song started to play, you could feel the presence of God in the room.
当那一首歌开始唱的时候呢，你可以感受到神的同在就进到我们的会场里面。
But those sniffles that I heard began to become sobs, like,
所以刚才我听的那个啜泣的哭声，现在就变成大大的哭声了，
And it got louder and louder.
哭得越来越大声。
In fact, it was so nerve-wracking that the adults that worked as security in the room were walking out the back.
那个哭声大到一个地步，就是我们在会堂里面的那些管理保安的，他们都受不了，他们就走出去了。
Because they told me later they couldn't stand the sound of all those young people crying.
因为他们后来告诉我说，他们没有办法忍受听见这些年轻人他们在那边啜泣跟哭泣。
Now, my senior pastor at the time loved to tell the story of Lonely Night.
那我当时的主任牧师很喜欢分享关于那一种暗夜的那一种故事，
But he would tell the story like this.
可是他会用这样的方式来描述那种孤单的夜晚。
He would say, "Church, isn't it great that we've reached all these young people that don't go to church anywhere?"
他就会告诉弟兄姐妹说：“教会们，我们得着这些从来不去教会的这些年轻人，是不是非常的好啊？”
And one night, Beth preached on loneliness, and Jesus touched all those kids' hearts who don't go to church anywhere.
然后 Beth 牧师呢就分享关于孤单，使这些从来不去教会的年轻人，他们可以被神的爱触摸。
But that was not true,
可是其实这不是真的，
because I saw who was standing up,
因为我看见到那些站起来的人，
and it was our pastor's children. It was all of my core leaders.
是我主要的青年牧区的同工，还有包含我们很多牧者传道人的孩子是站起来的。
Kids I'd poured my life into for years
是我花了很多年的时间去栽培他们、训练他们的孩子，
were standing up, sobbing their guts out, showing me that they're lonely.
然后站起来在那边那么大声的哭泣，告诉我说他们很孤单。
And for the first time ever, my belief system began to shift.
在那一天，我整个的核心信念就开始被翻转。
And I began to think, even with all these numbers, maybe what we're doing doesn't work.
我就在想，虽然我们的人数已经增长到这么多，可能我们所做的其实不是真的有果效。
So that's the day I really started asking questions.
所以从那一天开始，我就开始问了很多的问题，
And I began to search
我就开始去寻找，
and ask people if we were truly meeting the deepest needs of people.
我就在问说，如果我们真的在触摸人心里面最深的需要，
And as I told the story about Lonely Night, this is the response I generally got.
通常我讲到那种孤单的夜晚的时候，大家会给我的回应大概是这样子：
Those young people just need to pray more.
那些年轻人多祷告，
They should read their Bibles more and spend more time with God.
多读经，多祷告，跟神多花一点时间相处就可以了。
Basically, they told me to tell them to do exactly what we were already doing, but to just try harder.
他基本上很多的这些的回应就是做我们已经在做的事，然后更努力再多做一点好了。
And I sort of gave up trying to find an answer.
然后呢，我就好像放弃了去寻找那个真正可以找的答案。
But that seed had definitely been planted in my heart that surely there's something else.
但是那个种子已经放在我心里面，那个种子是什么？就我里面有个很深的渴望，应该有更多吧，不是只有这样子的。
So let's press pause on my personal story for a minute
所以现在在我的故事当中，我们要稍微暂停一下，
and switch to a story in the Bible that Bob mentioned last night.
然后我们转到圣经里面，其中一个故事是爸牧师昨天有提到的。
And that's the story of the woman at the well.
那个故事就是在井边的那个妇人，撒玛利亚妇人。
This story always used to be my favorite.
这个故事以前总是我最喜欢的故事，
But I would switch to the very end of it after the woman had had the encounter with Jesus at the well.
我通常都会转向讲到就是当她这个妇人已经遇见完耶稣之后，后来所发生的事情。
And she's back in the village telling everyone, "Come see a man who told me everything about me."
然后呢，他就回到他的乡镇说：“你们来看这位弥赛亚，他讲到一切关乎我的事情。”
And Jesus is talking to his disciples,
然后耶稣在跟他的门徒们对话，
saying, "You say that the harvest is in 4 months,
然后他就跟他们说：“你们说庄稼还有4个月。”
but I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields. They're ready for harvest now."
然后耶稣就告诉他们说：“举目向田观看，庄稼已经熟了，可以收割了。”
So I would preach that to get people motivated, like, let's go out in the harvest field.
我常常用这个信息去鼓励弟兄姐妹去传福音，去收割吧。
But I see that story much differently now.
但是我现在看这个故事跟以前的看法有点不太一样了。
Now I actually see that woman.
我现在真正看到那个撒玛利亚妇人，
And just like I was searching,
就像我在寻找一样。
I wonder what she was searching for the day she showed up at the well.
我不知道那一天当她去打水的时候，她在寻找什么。
See, I found that everyone has a story.
我想，因为我发现每一个人都有他自己的故事。
Everyone in this room has a story.
我们当中的每一个人，你都有你的故事。
But something that's universal to all our stories
但是有一个串联我们每一个故事在一起的那个主题是什么？
is all our stories involve pain.
就是我们每一个人的故事，其实里面都有伤痛。
And obviously, this woman had some pain because she showed up at the well when she was hoping no one else would be there.
这个妇人她里面有很深的伤痛，为什么？因为她出去打水的那个时间，是她希望没有人看见到她的时候。
Maybe she was used to people saying unkind words about her.
可能过去人常常对她批评论断，讲一些负面的话语。
Maybe she was used to being overlooked.
可能过去她都是被人忽略的。
One thing I love about Jesus,
你知道我最喜欢耶稣的一件事是什么呢？
he seems to always notice the overlooked.
他总是留意那些被忽略的人，
He notices the least likely.
他总是留心那些最不被注意到的人。
You may think that nobody notices you,
你可能觉得从来没有人在乎过你，
but Jesus sees you.
从来没有人看到你，可是耶稣看到你。
I love it that he kind of specializes in the least likely.
我非常的开心，耶稣他的专长就去寻找那些大家常常忽略的。
And that day at the well, Jesus walked right into this woman's story of pain.
在那一天，在井边旁，耶稣走进到这个充满了伤痛故事的妇人的生命里。
And I found that as I began to question and seek, he also walked into my story of pain.
那就像我自己的经历，当我开始问神问题，开始来寻找的时候，他也走进到我充满伤痛的故事里。
So let's fast forward 2 years.
然后我们现在在快转2年之后，
And I've moved to Orlando, Florida.
我搬到了佛罗里达州的 Orlando 城市。
And I'm the executive pastor, the number 2 pastor in a church.
我当时是那边教会的执行主任牧师，执行牧师就是第二个排第二的牧师，
A pretty prominent position, and I led all the staff under me.
是非常有影响力的一个位置。然后我在带领所有的同工。
But when I went home to Texas for Christmas, I had dinner with a friend named David Smith.
那当我回到圣诞节的时候，回到我的家，就是在德州，那我就跟一个朋友 David Smith 吃晚饭。
David Smith is one of our senior leaders at Gateway Church.
那 David Smith 其实是我们 Gateway 教会的一个主要的核心的领袖。
But I wasn't working at Gateway at the time.
那个时候我还没有在 Gateway 工作。
But remember my seeking and question asking?
你记得我在那个阶段，其实不断地在寻找、在询问那个答案到底是什么。
It kind of spilled out over our dinner.
所以在我们吃晚餐的时候，我就不由自主的就分享出来，讲到我里面正在寻找的东西。
And in frustration, I asked my friend David, does Gateway Church actually have a ministry that helps people?
我就问这个 David 牧师说：“你们 Gateway 教会真的有一些的事工是可以帮助到人真正的需要的东西吗？”
I was just tired of pretending that telling people Jesus will meet your every need and sending them on their way would work.
然后，因为我已经很对过去我们牧养的方式，就是告诉人家说，耶稣会满足你一切的需要，然后你去更多的努力服侍，就这样子而已吗？
When I asked him, he laughed.
当我这样问他的时候，他就笑了。
He said, as a matter of fact, we do. It's called Freedom Ministries.
他说：“我们真的有这样的事工，那个事工叫做自由事工。”
I was like, well, can you connect me with whoever leads that?
我说：“你可不可以帮我介绍那个带领自由事工的人？”
So he did. He gave me Bob Hamp's information.
他就把 Bob 牧师的资料给了我，可以跟他联络。
And I called this the phone call that changed my life.
我就说这个跟 Bob 牧师打的这个电话是改变我生命的电话。
On the phone with Bob Hamp, he began to explain to me the key core concepts of Freedom Ministries.
就在电话上面呢，鲍牧师就开始跟我们分享整个自由事工它的主要理念是什么。
And even though I'd been in ministry for years,
虽然我全职服侍这么多年，
something about Freedom Ministries and the way he explained it just clicked.
他所讲的那个自由事工跟他解释的方式，在我的里面就有一个很深的共鸣。
Because he quoted the first Bible verse that I ever memorized.
因为他引用的经文是我第一个背起来的经文。
Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness,
先求神的国和神的义，
and all these things will be added unto you.
这些东西都会加给你。
But again, to actually explain that verse to me,
可是他对我的解释，
that whatever you seek first organizes every area of your life.
你所先求的东西会排列你生活当中的优先次序。
And suddenly I realized the fault of my big youth ministry.
我就突然明白我之前那个大的青年事工当中的问题在哪里了。
We sought first building a big youth ministry,
我们先求的是建立一个大的青年事工，
not building the kingdom.
而不是先求神的国。
So I produced some empty kids
所以我所带出来的是一些很空虚的年轻人，
in a great big youth ministry.
在一个很大的青年事工当中，却是非常空虚的年轻人。
You know the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
你知道分别善恶树那棵树吗？
I think it's produced some pretty big ministries in the past, mine included.
我告诉你，分别善恶树也结出很多伟大的事工，包含我的青年事工。
And as I talked to Bob on the phone,
就在电话上跟鲍牧师分享的时候，
I wanted to do what he talked about.
我就想要做他所分享的东西。
I wanted to put the kingdom first,
我要先求神的国，
not just in my ministry.
不只是在我的事工里面，
I wanted to put it first in my life.
我要先做在我自己的生命里。
So I invited Bob to come to Orlando, Florida to help me start it in my church.
我就邀请鲍牧师来到 Orlando 我的教会，然后可以开始这样的一个事工在我的教会里。
So Bob and Alan conveniently planned to come to Orlando, Florida, where it's warm in the dead of winter.
所以呢，鲍牧师跟阿文牧师他们就特别在在冬天最冷的时候，来到我们佛罗里达州，就是 Orlando 那个地方是最温暖的地方。
Because he's a smart guy, that Bob.
因为他很聪明，他知道如果要去的话，选那个时间去最温暖。
And we set up meetings with all our church leaders, and I was trying to get them all on board to do Freedom Ministries.
所以我把我所有的教会的同工都聚集起来，我希望他们能够支持这个自由的事工。
And I thought it was bringing them there to implement something in my church.
我本来想说是带他们来，能够帮助我们的教会开始这样的一个事工。
What I didn't realize was I was inviting them there to turn my world upside down.
可是我却不知道的是，我邀请他们来是却把我的世界完全的颠覆。
They'd been there one day, and God gave me a dream while I was asleep.
他们去的第一天，神就给我透过梦告诉我一件事，
It was actually very funny.
这是一个蛮有趣的梦。
In my dream, sports are huge in America.
在我的梦里面，你先要知道，在美国体育运动是非常大的一个事情，对美国人来说。
And my favorite team and my alma mater is Oklahoma State University.
那你知道我的大学，我很看重的我们大学的体育是那个俄克拉荷马州的那个大学。
But our arch rivals are Oklahoma University.
所以我是Oklahoma 的州立大学，我们的敌对的敌人就是 Oklahoma 大学，这是两个不一样的大学。
In my dream, I dreamed that we were outside playing sports, and I couldn't wait to get in the game.
那我就在梦里面呢，就看到我们在外面，就是在户外这边在做一些的运动，然后我就迫不及待的要去比赛。
And Bob walked up to me and says, "Hey, you want to play?"
然后 Bob 就走向我，然后说：“你要不要来玩
I'm like, "Yes, sure." ？”
我说：“我想玩。”
And he goes, "Okay, put this on."
他说：“你穿上这个东西。”
And he pulled a demonic obstacle from behind his back.
然后就从他后面拿出一个，就是那种邪灵的一个拦阻，从他后面里面说：“你把这个穿上。”
It was a hoodie of the team that I don't like at all.
然后他叫我穿上的是我最讨厌的那一个球队的衣服。
I'm like, "No." He's like, "Put this on." No, no.
他说穿这个，我说我才不要穿那个最讨厌的球队。
And in my dream, he just looked at me. I want you to put this on.
他在梦里面呢，就告诉我说，好像是，就说他说我要你穿上这个球衣。
I liked Bob, but I didn't like him that much.
我很爱巴牧师，可是我没有爱到这种程度，因为我对我的母校是非常忠贞的。
I didn't like that school. I liked my school.
我讨厌那个他要我穿衣服的学校，我喜欢的是我的母校。
But he kept going, put this on.
他就说穿起来，
Finally, I gave up and surrendered.
最后我就妥协了，我就穿上。
Give it to me.
我说好吧，给我吧，
I'll put it on.
我穿起来。
And so in my dream, I put it on.
在我的梦里面，我就穿起来。
And he said, look at me.
他说你看着我，
Because you can put something on and not really be wearing it.
你知道你可以把它穿起来，可是没有真的穿起来。
But I guess he saw in my eyes that I'd really submitted.
但是他看到我的眼，从我的眼睛当中，他看到我真的降服。
And he goes, come on.
他说好吧，来吧。
And I woke up.
那我就醒来了。
I'm like, that dream had to be of the devil.
我想说，这个梦一定是从魔鬼来的，
I hate that team.
因为我好恨那个球队。
But I was smart enough to ask God, are you trying to speak to me?
但是我当时还至少有一点点智慧，我问神说：“神，你尝试要在对我说什么
He immediately said, yes. ？”
然后主就说：“是我在跟你说话。
Whatever Bob asked you to do today, say yes. ”
他说：“不管今天爸爸要你做什么，你都说 yes。
Wow.
我说：“啊，
So about 1 hour later, Bob, Alan, and I are seated in my office.
所以1个小时之后呢，爸爸跟 Alan 在我的办公室里面，我们3个就坐在那边。
Bob looks across my big executive pastor desk
爸爸就看着我那个执行牧师的大的那个桌子，
and says, Beth, this afternoon we would like to pray with you.
他说 ：“Beth， 今天下午我们想跟你一起祷告。
Now, you need to know I'm a pretty private person.
那你要知道，其实我还蛮在乎我自己的隐私。
And if I hadn't had that dream,
如果我没有那样的一个梦的话，
I'd been like, oh, thank you, but that's okay. I'm okay. I'm good.
我一定会说：其实不需要，我自己回家祷告，你就你自己祷告。
Let's find somebody that's messed up. They need it more than me.
你们去找一个比真的是糟糕的人，他们需要你的祷告，远胜过我需要你的祷告。
But immediately I heard God, whatever Bob asks you to do, say yes.
然后我就听到神再次提醒我：爸爸要你做什么，你就说 yes。
So I said, okay.
我说好，我下午祷告。
So we, later on that afternoon, were seated in a room,
所以那天下午我们就坐在那个坐在一个房间里，
and we hadn't even started to pray, but Bob looked right at me and said these words,
我们还没开始祷告，爸爸就看着我这样对我说
you're a good soldier.
他说你是一个非常好的战士。
You might not think that would bring tears to a woman's eyes,
你大概不会想这样的一句话会让一个女人流泪，
but I started to cry.
然后我就突然开始哭了。
Those words were music to my ears.
那个听起来在我里面，你知道有多甜美吗？
You darn right I'm a good soldier.
是啊，我是一个很好的兵，很好的战士。
When I had that great big youth ministry,
当我当时拥有那么伟大的一个青年事工，
I had all these young people that worked for me
有很多这些年轻人，他们是他们是为我工作的。
because we had services Saturday morning,
因为我们礼拜六
Sunday
早
night.
上有崇拜，礼拜天
Monday
晚上有
night
崇拜，礼拜一晚上也有崇拜。
I had to prepare 3 sermons a week.
一个礼拜要准备3堂信息。
And those young kids that worked for me
那些为我工作的那些年轻人呢、
couldn't keep up with this old lady.
他们都跟不上我这个年长人的速度。
I would keep going,
我就一直跑，一直跑，一直跑，一直跑，
because I'm a good soldier.
因为我是一个很好的战士。
And the church where I was the executive pastor,
而我现在成为这个教会的这个执行牧师的这个教会，
we were at the final stages of a huge building remodel.
我们正在一个建堂的过程当中，已经快要结束了。
And I had overseen the whole thing.
然后这整个的建堂的这个计划是我监督的，
Tons of work.
很多细节的工作要做。
So when he said, you're a good soldier,
当他说你是一个非常好的战士，
yes, I am.
我说是的，我就是啊。
What about you?
那我要问你了，你呢？
You a good soldier?
你是一个很好的战士吗？
Let's press pause on my story again
再次暂停我的故事，
and go back to the woman at the well.
我们回到在井边的那个妇人。
Remember last night, Bob preached about the source.
记得昨天晚上巴牧师讲到 我们生命的源头吗？
Is your source the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
你的生命的源头是分别善恶树，
Or is your source the tree of life?
还是生命树？
In the story of the woman at the well,
在那个井边的妇人的故事里，
Jesus went straight to this woman's source as well.
耶稣直接挑战这个妇人她的源头，
She wanted some of that rivers of living water.
因为她也渴望那一个腹中的活水。
So Jesus said, Go and get your husband.
耶稣就跟她说：“去找你的先生来。”
Because her source was she found her significance in men.
因为她的来源是什么？她生命的来源是来自于那些男人。
You know, I've heard sermon preached on this passages that God knows your sin.
我听过有人使用这个经文在讲道的时候，他说：“神，你看见了没有？神知道我们生命当中的罪。”
And they will preach that that's why Jesus was asking for her husband was to point out her sin.
这是为什么耶稣会问这个问题，说你去把你的丈夫找来，因为耶稣要指出他生命当中的罪。
Please hear me. That is not why he was pointing that out.
你要注意听我所说的，那不是耶稣指出叫她去找她丈夫的目的。
He was not in any way trying to shame her for her sin.
耶稣没有任何时刻尝试要因着她所犯的罪使她感到羞愧。
Jesus is absolutely not a shaming God.
我们的耶稣，我们的神，他不是使我们羞愧的神。
He was gently trying to show her how she got her value and worth.
他只是温柔的帮助这个井边的妇人知道她的价值感跟她的那个生命的来源是来自于什么。
If he shamed her that day, why would she have run back in joy to her entire village and said, Come meet a man, come meet a man?
如果他使他羞辱，如果耶稣羞辱他，或者使他羞愧，他怎么会之后跑去告诉整个城镇的人说，来认识这位先生？
She was someone whose life was radically changed when he touched her source.
当耶稣改变了他的那个生命的源头的时候，他的生命完全的翻转。
Her source went from men to the tree of life in one instant.
他的生命的来源从过去是从男人身上得着，当下立刻转向生命树，生命的源头，他的生命就完全的翻转。
And when she ran back to her village, people saw the life on her.
当他回去到他的城镇的时候，人们从他的身上看见到了生命。
He changed her forever.
耶稣永远改变了他。
So now we'll go back to my story.
所以再次回到我的故事里，
That comment, you're a good soldier, was the big setup.
他对我所说的“你是一个很好的战士”，其实是神给我一个最好的设计。
Because Bob had me talking to Jesus,
然后后来巴牧师就邀请我跟耶稣对话，
and he said, Ask him if he would rather have a good soldier or a beloved daughter.
然后他就说：“你要不要问耶稣，他要的是一个好的战士，还是他想要的是一个他所爱的女儿？”
I thought, oh,
这是什么问题啊？
I know the answer to this one.
这个答案我已经知道了，
I've preached the answer to that one.
我这篇信息也讲过。
I think I probably looked at him like I know the answer to this one.
我给他的那种反应就是那种我已经知道答案是什么了。
But I needed God Almighty, the tree of life, to answer that question for me.
但是我需要这位永生的神，生命树的生命的源头来回答我这个问题。
So I asked God,
所以我就问神说：“主啊，神，
would you rather have a faithful soldier
你要的是一个忠心的勇士战士，
or a beloved daughter?
还是一个蒙爱的女儿？”
And God said,
然后神就说
I just want you to be my little girl.：“
我只想要你做我的小女孩、小女儿。
I'm just glad you're home.
我很开心你回家了。
I'm not demanding a performance from you.
我跟你要的不是好的表现的，
You don't have to be a good soldier for me."
你不需要为我做一个好的战士。
That one moment changed everything in my life.
那一刹那间，我的生命完全的改变了。
I resigned from being a good soldier.
我就从做一个好战士那一天，我递了我的辞呈。
I no longer come into God's presence and salute and ask for my marching orders.
我不再来到神的同在、神的面前，然后跟神敬礼，然后跟他讲说，我接下来的任务是什么。
I now serve a God that I can walk right into His presence.
我现在认识的这一位神，是我随时可以走到他的同在里。
And I can say, Father, I need you to hug me today.
我可以跟他说，天父爸爸，我今天需要你抱抱我。
I love the tree of life so much more than the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
让我告诉你，我爱生命树，远远的超过分别善恶树。
And I started a journey that day to my own freedom.
而那一天开始了我自己这个自由的旅程。
The first step in all our journeys to freedom
在我们每一个人的自由旅程当中的第一步，你知道是什么吗？
is to connect to the right source.
是把我们生命的源头连接于正确的源头。
If you're a good soldier like I was,
如果你像我一样是一个好的战士，
you need to quit the army
你需要从这个军队当中辞职，
and choose to become a child.
然后来成为他的儿女。
Now, I would be lying if I stood before you and told you my journey to freedom was easy.
如果我告诉你我的自由的旅程，这个过程是很容易的，其实我在骗你啊。
In fact, I believe God gave me a choice.
其实我相信神其实给我在这过程当中选择。
So it wasn't long after that I was in our church building all by myself.
所以呢，这个事件发生之后，有一天我自己在我的教堂里面。
Because remember I said we were in a church remodel?
你记得我刚才讲过，我们在整个的会堂重新的装潢的里面。
We were in a season where we had to move every chair out of the auditorium each week.
所以呢，我们每一个礼拜其实都需要把椅子搬出去，然后再去周间施工，然后周末再继续聚会。
But we had to move them back again before the weekend services.
所以在周末要聚会之前，要把那个椅子再搬回来。
And I guess I failed to communicate.
那因为我忘记跟弟兄姐妹沟通，
But this particular day, I was the only person who showed up to move chairs.
那所以呢，我忘记跟他们报告这个事情，所以那一天来帮忙搬椅的只有我一个人。
Fun times.
一个人哎。
So I set all the chairs up and then I sat down on the edge of the stage.
所以我就把所有的椅子都弄好之后，我就坐在讲台上面的前面。
And as I did, God began to speak to me.
然后就开始对我说话。
And I was trying to learn how to be a daughter.
我那时候在学习怎么样做一个他的女儿。
And he gave me a picture of the path I would take to freedom.
他就给我看见一个图像，是我要走在这个里面，如何进到自由的旅程的一个图像。
Now, please don't think I'm weird and goofy.
你不要觉得我其实是很怪的人，其实我不是，
Okay?
可以吗？哦。
But as I sat there on the edge of the stage, I got a vision.
可是就在我坐下来，坐在讲台上面的时候呢，我就领受了一个意象，
And it's like the auditorium disappeared
就好像这整个的会堂消失在我眼前，
and a big valley appeared.
然后前面就有一个很深的谷，
And on the far side of the valley was the Heavenly Father.
在谷的另外一端是天父爸爸，
It was beautiful over there.
在那边是非常的柔美。
And he was saying, "Come here."
他就说：“来这里，来这里。”
But the only way there was this path right in front of me.
可是唯一去到那边的方式，是我现在必须在前面走的这条路。
And the path was dark. It went 10 feet down, went to the side in a dark, thick forest.
可是那一个要走的路却是非常非常的黑，好黑，而且它往前面走，然后走进到一个很黑的一个丛林里面去。
It looked like a very difficult, dark path.
感觉起来是一个非常困难，而且又是黑暗的这一条路。
So as I felt God say, "Come here,"
当我听见主说来，
I looked at that path and I thought, "No thanks."
我看见那条路，我就跟神说：算了吧，
I didn't want to do that.
我不想往下走，然后走那个过程啊。
I felt God telling me that I might pay a high price for my freedom.
我感觉神在对我说，为了要得着我的自由，我可能要付上极大的代价。
And that he would walk me through some dark places.
他会带我走过一些非常黑暗的地方。
So since I wasn't eager to go,
是因为我没有那么期待想要走这条路，
he gave me another picture.
他就带给我另外一个图像。
As I looked at that path, another me, I'm looking at another Beth, comes popping up out of the darkness.
然后我就看见呢，就在我看到那个黑黑的路的过程中，我看见到我自己另外一个 Beth 就从那条路走出来。
And the Beth I'm looking at has all this cool hiking gear on.
然后我就看见那个我在里面就有所有最先进的爬山的工具跟服装，
Because it's all about the, outfit and boots and stuff, right, ladies?
对不对？对姐妹来讲，其实外面的这个东西最重要，对不对？看起来至少要看起来很好。
I'm telling you, the Beth I was looking at had awesome hiking boots.
然后我所看见到那个 Beth， 她的那个登山鞋是超好的。
And I'm like, wow, that's awesome, but I still don't know.
我说看起来不错了，但是还是不想走。
So I asked God a question
我就在问神一个问题，
because I could tell I was looking at a trail guide.
因为我可以知道我在看到的那个是一个就是走那种山路的向导。
I said, God, if I go down this dark path
我说神，如果我真的走向这个黑暗的道路，
and I make it back like the Beth that you're showing me with that cool outfit,
然后我回来的时候呢，就像这个你让我看见那个 Beth 一样，有这么好的设备，这么好的装备。
do you promise that one day I'll get to take hundreds of people down the sand path with me?
那你可以应许我，有一天我可以带几百、几千个人走的这一条自由的道路吗？
He said, yes, if you'll go down this path and walk this journey, you'll take hundreds of people with you eventually.
他说是的，如果你愿意走这一条路，然后走下去的话，有一天你会带成千的人走到这个自由的路上。
But I wanted to be sure,
可是我还是要确定，
so I asked one more time.
我就再问一次，
You promise?
我说神，你应许我，你
If
答
I
应
say
我，
yes to this journey, you'll one day let me take hundreds of people down this same path of freedom.
我就再问你一次，如果我回应走这一个旅程，你真的会让我有一天可以带着几百个、几千个人走这个路吗？
So that day, I started a journey that I'm still on.
所以那天开始，这个旅程是我现在还在走的旅程，
It's been 3.5 years.
已经3年半了。
And Bob and Alan can tell you,
Bob 跟 Alan 都会告诉你，
it's been a rocky road at times, hasn't it?
在我的这个旅程过程当中，有的时候还蛮艰难的。
My church wasn't as receptive to freedom ministries as I was.
当时我的教会对自由事工的敞开度不像我这么敞开，
Although they could tell it changed my life,
虽然他们知道这改变我的生命，
we headed to a collision.
所以后来在教会里面就有一些的冲突发生，有一些的张力。
And about 3 months after I agreed to take the journey,
那在3个月，当我回应神的那个决定之后的3个月，第3个月，
my spiritual father asked me to resign.
我的属灵的父亲就告诉我说，叫我辞职。
I was on the telephone with Bob about 5 minutes after it happened,
当他叫我辞职之后的5分钟，我就打电话给 Bob，
and he said these words to me:
他就这样对我说，
You can't hear me now, but God is rescuing you.
他说你现在可能听不懂我在讲什么，但是神他在搭救你，神在拯救你。
But the difference when you're in the tree of life,
你知道，当你在生命树跟分别善恶树的差别是什么？
you can hear truth.
就是当你在生命树的时候，你可以听进去真理。
I heard him that day.
那一天，我听进他所说的东西，
I knew I'd done nothing wrong.
我知道我没有做任何的错，
I didn't have anything to be ashamed of.
我也没有任何好羞愧的，
I just wanted to be free.
我只是单纯的想要自由而已。
And in essence, it cost me my position.
那个自由的代价，我失去了我的头衔跟位置。
So I packed up all my boxes and I left that night.
所以那天晚上呢，我就打包我所有的行李，那天晚上就离开了。
But you know what I didn't leave?
你知道我没有，然后我带了所有的东西，但是有些东西我没有带。你知道我什么东西没有带吗？
That path that I promised God I would walk on.
我没有离开的是我回应神，我选择要走的那个道路。
And you know that teaching Pastor Allen did about anatomy of a stronghold?
昨天我们Alan 牧师跟我们分析整个的坚固营垒的形成。
I kept asking God, God, what lies have I believed?
我就继续在问神说：神，我到底相信过去到底相信过什么样的谎言？
And I got to go through a season
我就经历一个季节，
that I'm still on today,
这个季节是我今天还在走的季节。
where God began to show me lie after lie.
神就开始向我显明，在我生命当中那些的谎言。
And just like Jesus put his finger on men at the woman at the well,
就像耶稣在面对这个井边的妇人，指出他生命当中那个来源是男人的时候，
previously all my sources of security had been found in my church ministry.
我过去所有的来源都是来自于我教会的服事跟事工，
And now it was gone.
而现在他把这个来源关上了。
But guess what wasn't gone?
但是你知道什么东西没有离开吗？
The connection to the tree of life.
我跟生命树的连接仍然存在。
And I found out for the first time,
然后我就第一次发现，
he really was all I needed.
他真的就是我一切所需。
And I got to have a season of seeking him.
我就有一个季节是单单寻求他的面。
I just found a church close to my house because I was not going to turn my back on the body of Christ.
那我就在我的家旁边找了一个教会，因为我仍然没有我觉得我仍然爱神爱教会。
I felt God told me God told me not to tell my friends that I knew could help me find a job that I was unemployed.
神特别告诉我，让我这样的一个被离职的这样的一个状况，不要告诉我任何的朋友，因为他们其实可以很容易帮我找到下一个服侍的工作。
Because Florida was far away from all my friends and family.
因为当时我在佛罗里达州的那个服侍，其实离我的家人都是很远的。
But I just walked into this church,
然后有一天我就走进到这个教会，在我家旁边那个教会，
just worshiped God.
就在那边很单纯的来敬拜神。
But the pastor met me.
然后那个牧师就来找我。
And you know what? When you're connected to the tree of life,
你知道，当你与生命树连结的时候，
you spread life everywhere you go.
你去的任何地方，你都释放出生命。
The pastor was like, "Would you come in and talk to me?"
那个牧师就说：“你可不可以来跟我谈一下？
I'd never met this young man ever.
我从来不认识这个年轻的牧师哦。
I went to the church because I thought it was non-denominational.
我去这个教会，因为我觉得他是没有宗派的一个独立的教会。
But as I talked to this young pastor named Jason,
那我就碰到这个牧师，他的名字叫做 Jason。
I found out that they had history in independent Baptist.
所以他们过去是那种独立的浸信会。
I knew nothing about independent Baptist,
那我
so
对独立浸信会的这个宗派一点概念都没有。
so after I met Pastor Jason and really liked him, I went home and Googled independent Baptist.
所以我很喜欢碰到这个 Jason 牧师之后呢，我很喜欢他，所以后来我就是 Google 上网去查这个独立浸信会派是什么东西。
And I almost hyperventilated when I found out what they believed.
当我发现他们所相信的东西，我差点高血压。
They believe you can only read the King James Version of the Bible.
他们觉得你只能够读那个 King James 的版本的圣经。
They don't believe women can do anything in ministry.
他们不相信姐妹可以参与任何方面的服饰。
Every picture on the website I found had men in suits and ties.
我看见的每一个这个教会的男士都是穿的西装，打着领带，
Gross.
很恶心的一个图像。
That is not what I was looking for.
我在找的不是这个东西。
But this young couple, Jason and Judy,
那可是这对年轻的牧师夫妇呢 ，Jason 跟 Judy，
just kept reaching out to me and my husband Dale.
一直来找我跟我的先生。
And within a couple of weeks, he was asking me, a woman,
然后在几个礼拜之后，他就邀请我是一个姐妹，你要知道，
to join his staff.
加入到他的团队里面。
When you're connected to the tree of life,
当你连接于生命树的时候，
you can change things.
你可以改变很多东西的。
I was just being me.
我其实只是单纯的做我自己而已。
You know that promise God gave me that I could take a lot of people with me on a journey to freedom?
你记得神给我的那个应许吗？就是我可以带着很多的人跟我一起走向这个自由的旅程。
One of the first people I took was a senior pastor.
我第一个带的人就是一个主任牧师，
So I just faithfully worked in that church.
所以我就忠心的在那个教会里面工作。
until Bob Hamp called me to work at Gateway.
直到 Bob 牧师打电话邀请我去到 Gateway 那边服侍。
But guess who replaced me at that other church?
但是你知道谁后来做了我之前在那个教会做的位置吗？
The senior pastor's wife, who was one of the most anointed pastors I'd ever met.
就是那个女主任牧师的师母，也是我认为最有恩高、认识中最有恩高的一位牧师之一。
And that church has a thriving freedom ministries today.
现在那个教会它也有非常兴旺的自由事工。
And they don't read the King James only.
他们不只是读 King James 的圣经版本而
And
已，
they wear jeans and T-shirts.
他们也可以穿着牛仔裤、穿着 T 恤，
And they're free.
然后他们终于自由了。
So, and I've questioned myself as I've been at Gateway,
所以我在 Gateway 之后，我也会常常问我自己，
because I'm not Bob Hamp or Alan Smith.
因为我不是 Bob 牧师，也不是 Alan 牧师，
They're just really smart.
因为他们好聪明哦，
They like to study.
他们很喜欢研读东西，
So I just let them study and I steal all the stuff after they do the hard work.
所以我就让他们去研究，然后研究完的结论我都我就把它偷过来。
But I question, am I really a freedom pastor?
我就常常会怀疑，我就常常会问，我真的是一个自由事工的牧师吗？
No matter how hard I try, I cannot preach like Bob Hamp.
不管我多努力，我都没有办法像爸牧师这样的讲道。
And we have a prophetic presbytery night at Gateway.
在 Gateway 我们有一个特别晚上，就是先知性服饰的一个夜晚。
My husband and I were selected to be on the stage to be prophesied over.
那有一次呢，他们就找了我跟我的丈夫在台上，他们要为我们发预言。
And it was a man that had never laid eyes on me before.
为我发预言的那个弟兄是从来没有看过我，我也不认识他的，
There's no way he knew anything.
因为他不会知道我任何东西的。
You know how God redeems situations?
你知道神会买赎一些的环境吗？
He walked up to me and said, "For 3.5 years, you've been on a journey."
然后他看到我，他就对我说：“过去的3年半，你在一个旅程里。”
My senior pastor, Robert Morris, leaned over and said, "Is that when she lost her job?" Because they know my history.
啊，然后我的主任牧师是 Robert 牧师，就转过来说：“是不是3年半前他被炒鱿鱼啊
That's nice. But？”
我说：“你真的很好。”
I didn't want to be known for that.
我说：“我不希望人家知道我3年半被炒鱿鱼。”
But as the guys prophesying over me, I heard them talking. They said yes.
然后呢，他一边在对我发预言，他们在那边就是在我旁边那边交谈关于我的事情，我听到他们这样交谈。
So the man that's never seen me has no idea what I do at Gateway Church.
所以那个人从来没有见过我，也不知道我在 Gateway 教会做什么。
Said, "You've been on a journey for 3.5 years,
他说：“你在过去的3年半，在一个旅程里，
and God has made you a freedom fighter.
神让你成为一个为自由来征战的勇士。
You are called to set people free.
你被呼召要使人得着自由。
And the only reason you can set people free
你为什么可以使人得自由呢？
is you learned firsthand that Jesus could set you free.
因为你第一手的经历，耶稣可以使你得自由。
So I believe that He'll use me one day to lead hundreds down the same path.
所以我真的相信，有一天他会让我可以带着成百成千的人走向这个自由的旅程。
But the journey never ends.
可是这个自由的旅程永远不会停止的。
So this is my word of advice.
所以我想给你的建议是什么呢？
You know, I said I'm tempted to be private.
你知道我其实我是非常非常喜欢一个人看重隐私的人。
Which is also a way to say I have lots of defenses that I've built from all my lies.
其实这样看重隐私也是一种防卫机制，在我的生命的里面来保护我，来武装我自己。
I want to encourage you to take your hands down like I've taken mine down.
我要鼓励你，把你这些防卫机制所筑起来的墙，都把它拿下来。
And take your life and turn it inside out and say, I'm not going to hide any part from you, God.
把你的心从里面完全的翻开给神说，主，我不要再向你有任何的隐藏了。
If there's pain in my past, Jesus, will you touch it and redeem it?
耶稣，如果我的生命当中过去有伤痛的，你可不可以来触摸、买赎这个伤痛？
You know, recently I sat down with a friend and we were praying.
最近我跟一个朋友一起坐下来在祷告的时候，
My friend had me ask God what he would say to me.
我的朋友就说：“你可不可以问神说，神要对你说什么
This was just a few weeks ago.？”
这是几个礼拜前的事情而已。
And I'm telling you this story so you'll see I'm still in this journey just like you.
我要分享这个故事，是要告诉你们，其实我仍然在这个旅程当中，就像你们一样。
I looked up and I said, God said he's the one that keeps me safe.
然后我就听见神告诉我说：“我是使你安全的那一位。”
I thought that was odd because I'm not a fearful person.
我觉得这个话很奇怪，因为我不是一个容易害怕的人。
Ask Jesus, he said, ask Jesus the first time you didn't feel safe.
然后那个我朋友就说：“你可不可以问耶稣，你第一次感受到不安全感是什么时候
I thought that's a weird question,？”
我想这是一个很奇怪的问题，
but I'll ask it. I didn't remember ever not feeling safe.
因为我不知道有没有安全感的状况是什么，所以我还是问了这个问题。
So I bowed my head, and God brought up a memory from when I was 6 years old.
当我眼睛一闭起来的时候，神就让我回忆到我6岁的发生的一个事件。
I was the youngest child in our neighborhood
在我们的那一个社区当中，我是最小的一个小孩，
and the only girl.
也是唯一的女生。
But we would play the neighborhood game of hide and go seek,
那我们会跟着这个我们社区的孩子们一起玩躲猫猫。
and the oldest boy in the neighborhood announced that I was too young to hide by myself.
那个最年长的那个这就是那个年轻人说我太小了，所以我不能一个人躲，
So he would take me.
所以他会带着我一起去躲。
So he took me to a shed behind a house.
他就带我去到那个房子后面另外一个小小的地方，
And in that shed, he touched me
然后在那个地方他就摸我的身体，
and molested me during that game.
就在那个游戏当中，他性侵犯了我。
Now, what I suffered isn't close to any of the horrors many women suffer.
当然，我所经历的东西跟很多姐妹、很多妇女所经历的是完全没有办法相比的。
But a 6-year-old was still violated.
但是一个6岁的孩子仍然被冒犯了。
I didn't realize that could still affect me today.
我不知道，当6岁所发生的事情仍然可以影响今天的我。
But that's the memory that popped up.
可是当我眼睛闭起来的时候，我就想起这个事情。
So just like Pastor Allen taught you, I had to go through the hurt,
就像艾伦牧师昨天所说的，我必须要经历那个事件所带给我的伤痛，
the lie I believed, and how I learned to protect myself.
以至于在那个伤痛所带来的谎言，因着这个谎言，我怎么样学习保护我自己。
And God redeemed that hurt of my past.
而神他买赎回来我这个过去的伤痛，
So it's embarrassing for me to tell you that story,
所以要讲这样的故事其实是不容易分享的。
but that event no longer has power over me.
但是那个事件在我的身上不再有权辖制我，
So I'm sharing it to encourage you to not hide parts of your story.
所以当我这样的分享出来，是要鼓励你不要再隐藏任何你生命当中的故事了，
Because God wants you to be free,
因为神他乐意看见你自由。
and you can't be free when you hide.
当你在隐藏里，你就没有办法经历真自由。
So I want you to close your eyes, and I want to ask a few questions.
我要邀请你把眼睛闭起来，然后我要问你几个问题。
God, will you please come and speak to us?
神，现在来对我们说话好吗？
The first question I want to ask everyone in this room,
我要问我们当中每一个人的第一个问题是：
are you a good soldier or a son or daughter?
你是一个好的战士，还是一个好的儿女？
And don't answer that for me. I want you to ask God that question. Am I a good soldier or am I your son or daughter?
你不是要回答我这个问题，你是要问神，让神告诉你。
If you're like me
如果
and
你
he
就像我
tells
一
you
样，
you're a good soldier,
他告诉你说你是一个很好的战士，
I want to pray for you that you'll resign from the army like I did.
我要为你祷告，让你可以从这个军队当中递上你的辞呈。
You can keep your eyes closed, but if you want to resign from being a soldier and become a son or daughter,
你可以现在眼睛仍然闭起来。如果你想要从这个军队递出你的辞呈，然后来成为神的儿女，
I want you to slip up your hand so I can pray for you.
让你今天把手举起来之后放下，我要来为你祷
If you're resigning from God's army and you want to be a son or daughter, slip your hand up and keep it up
如果
because I'm going to pray over you.
如果你要从这个军队当中递出你的辞呈，然后加入到他的儿女的行列里面，可不可以把你手举起来，然后继续举起来？我要为你祷告。
Now, God, you see all these hands.
主，你看见到我们当中所有的这些手，
These are people that no longer want to be soldiers.
这些人他们不想要继续做战士，
They want to be your son and your daughter.
他们渴望成为你蒙爱的儿女。
So will you pull them close
你是否可以把他们带靠近你的心，
and tell them you're just glad to have them home?
然后告诉他们你好开心，他们回家，
They can stop performing now.
他们可以停止再继续为你表现。
Will you listen to God say that to you right now?
你可不可以来听神天父爸爸现在在对你说这个话？
He's just glad you're home.
他好开心你回家了，
He loves you.
他爱你。
You can put your hands down.
可以把你手放下。
Here's my next question.
我要问你的第二个问题是这个，
Same one God asked me.
也是神问我当时问我的问题。
Will you go on a journey to freedom with me?
你是否愿意跟我走上这个通往自由的旅程？
He's asking you that today.
今天主在问你这个问题，
Will you go on a journey and pursue your freedom with Him?
你是否愿意跟我走上这个旅程，跟我一起来追求自由？
So one more time,
再一次，
if you want to go on that journey,
如果你做好决定要走上这个自由的旅程，
I want you to hold up your hand and I want to pray over you.
我要再一次邀请你把手举起来，我要为你祷告。
Keep it up, please.
继续高高的举起。
God, thank you for my brothers and sisters.
主，为我的弟兄姐妹向你献上感谢。
Thank you that today they're placing their feet on the path.
主，我感谢你今天让他们的脚走上这一个旅程的道路。
And they're saying they want to walk with you,
他们在说他们愿意与你同行，
even if it's dark at times.
虽然有的时候看起来可能是很黑暗。
I pray for my brothers and sisters
我为我的弟兄姐妹来祷告，
that they will say in their hearts,
让他们在心里面会这样说：
I'm never getting off this path,
我永远不要离开这个自由的道路，
not because I'm a good soldier,
不是因为我是一个好的战士，
but because I'm your child.
因为我是你的儿女，
And I want to be everything you've created and redeemed me to be.
我要成为所有你创造我、买赎我回来应该有的样式。
Thank you
谢
for
谢
what
你
you're doing.
谢谢你，天父，谢谢你在我们当中所做的，
But never forget,
永远不要忘记，
He loves you
他爱你，
and He's just glad you're home.
他好开心你回家了。
Enjoy the journey.
享受这个自由的旅程。
enjoy the journey.
享受这个自由的旅程。
In Jesus' name,
奉主
amen.
耶稣的名祷告，阿门。
Thank you
谢
for
谢
letting me
你。
share my story.
谢谢你们愿意来听我的故事。